Hello and welcome to a discussion about foreign affairs with local officials. My name is Tres Savage. I'm the editor-in-chief of NonDoc.com. We're partnering with News 9 and Scott Mitchell with Mitchell Talks to have this gathering today on something called StreamYard, which is exciting to learn about. Brittany Toolis is here with News 9. Brittany, how are you this morning?
Good. How are you guys all doing?
I'm pretty good. I'm going to introduce everybody else. Some of them are like, this is not the woman that we met the other day who was going to do this. You're filling in for Augusta McDonald, who had something come up that she couldn't participate in this, but we're going to wing it and have a good discussion. And with all the gentlemen here, I want to introduce some folks. And when I introduce you, I'm going to say all your names real quick, and then maybe when I say your name, if you could just give us one sentence about where you represent, what your position is, and then what your background in military service has been. But just try to keep it to a sentence or so. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we're speaking with the Veterans Caucus, which is a bicameral caucus in the legislature of Oklahoma. And the chairman of that caucus is Representative Jay Stegall. How are you, sir? And introduce yourself just briefly.
Good morning. Thanks for having us. I'm the House co-chair for the Veterans Caucus. Senator J.J. Dossett is our Senate co-chair. I represent the Yukon area. I've spent nearly 23 years in the military, 9 deployments, retired as a major KC-135 pilot.
Wonderful. Well, let's go very next to Senator J.J. Dossett, the co-chairman from the Senate.
Hello, I'm J.J. Dossett. I have Owasso in North Tulsa County is my area I represent. I spent 19 years, pushing 20 on in the Oklahoma Air National Guard. I'm an Iraq and Afghanistan deployer, as most anyone in the military is at this point. So, happy to be here.
Wonderful. I'll just go back to the, we'll just finish out the Senate side. Senator Mark Allen, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Mark Allen. I represent Poto and Salisaw, eastern part of the state. I served in the United States Navy Seabees during the Vietnam era.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And Senator Peterson.
Yes, thanks for having us this morning. I served the District 19, which is basically the center part of the district. It's Enid, Oklahoma. I've served 4 counties up in the north central part of the state. I served in the Air Force Reserves for 6 years, and it was back in the 70s.
Wonderful. We'll go to the House side again real quick. Representative Chris Kennedy, introduce yourself for us.
Yeah, sure. Good morning. Chris Kennedy. I represent South Oklahoma City. Served about 10 years in the Marine Corps. I'm a judge advocate and still serve in the Air National Guard with my the only other person in the legislature, Senator. It's in the Guard, Senator Dossett.
Wonderful. And last but not least, Representative Josh West. Tell us about yourself. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's Ty Burns' shoulder that's right there. So you could have him introduce himself as well. Or we may have frozen Representative West. I'm not sure. Is he frozen? Well, we'll see what happens. Maybe, he's going to log back in. So with that, I just want to give kind of the nexus of this discussion. We were talking, the Veterans Caucus meets on Thursday mornings. You guys just met. This is being recorded Thursday morning, March 10th. And the genesis behind this discussion was that with everything that's going on in Ukraine right now, kind of wanted to get the opinion of folks who have a military background and probably who pay attention to these things maybe a little closer than the average Oklahoman or the average American, and wanted to kind of have a discussion on people's thoughts, not really political. I don't expect this to be a super partisan or political conversation, but wanted to just see where people were on some of these topics. I'm going to turn it to Brittany for the first question in just a minute, but Representative West, it looks like you're back with us. Would you just introduce yourself, tell us where you're from and where your service took you?
Yeah, thanks, Trace. I don't know what happened here with the internet, but I'm Josh West. I represent House District 5. Been in 6 years, Delaware County, Mays County. Came in 16 with a bunch of us, and myself, Chris Candy, McDougal, a few others started the Veterans Caucus in 17. I've served on the Veterans Committee. I did 9 years in the Army, 101st Airborne Division, deployed to Afghanistan, Iraq, and then spent 6 years in the private contractor world. So glad to be here.
Wonderful. Well, I think it goes without saying, but thank you for your service to everybody. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brittany with our first question. We're going to kind of toss it open with the first one just to see who wants to go first. So, Brittany?
Yeah, this is open to the whole group. So as you guys have watched the Russian invasion unfold in Ukraine, guess what has been your reaction, especially with all the years of experience you guys all have?
I'll tackle it first. First and foremost, our thoughts and prayers go out with the Ukrainian people. We know that they're dealing with a lot. Evacuations are still underway. Some 2 million plus Ukrainians have left the country.
We may have a technical difficulty in the state capitol. Who knows? Oh, now he's crooked. Okay, there we go. He's rotated to the right, I guess, that would make sense for Republican representative. Somebody else pick up where he left off. What's been your reaction?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll jump in. I think being a service member, it's a different reaction than most. I mean, it's obviously shocking to many people that in this day and age that we have one sovereign country invading another. And so I think as a veteran, you look at it as fundamentally that's a problem. I mean, we have these fake lines of who is a part of NATO and who's not. At the end of the day, what the concern is Russia's trying to establish a foothold. If we think that Russia's going to stop here, we're completely off base. And so I think as someone who's still serving the military from a strategy perspective, I'm concerned that if we don't engage in some form or do more now than what we're doing other than economic sections, that it's going to be a lot worse for us in the long run.
Anybody agree, disagree?
My comment would have to be, I can't hardly believe that there are people that they're actually being squelched, because I don't think he really has the support of his people, and to continue to do what he's doing and being that aggressive. That's kind of I'm taken back from that about that.
About Vladimir Putin?
Yes, about how his people. It appears we're just seeing the media give us our information, but it appears that he does not have support within his country for doing what he's doing.
I talked to John Wayne Troxel daily. He was up here a couple of weeks ago. He's a former SEAC, so the senior enlisted advisor to the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. Retired a few years ago, and he came down here and do a podcast with us. And we had the SEAC of Ukraine with us. And one thing they talked about was the resiliency of the people. And I think you got to respect that as an American and put yourself in their shoes. If we've got, if we had another country trying to come into our land and invade us, I hope that our citizens would do the same thing that the Ukrainian citizens has. And they're fighting for their country. And like Candy said, they are sovereign. You got two sovereign nations. Do I personally think we should put ground troops in and go to war with Russia? No, I don't think so. But I think that we're going to have to help out at some point, because like Chris said, this is just the first step. If he succeeds with this, then what else is he going to do? And also, what is China going to do? What is North Korea going to do? And so there's a lot of players on the outside looking in to see how this goes. And, this could have huge implications for years to come around the world.
Well, I think let me go ahead, Representative. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say briefly, Trace, that one of the things that was really impactful to me with that conversation that Josh set up, we were talking to senior enlisted advisor, and again, another sovereign nation. Ukraine has 40 million people. And the one comment that stuck in my craw, he said, Putin is just a modern day Hitler. That's from someone in the fight, in the battle. And I think that's a pretty compelling statement.
I've got to agree on the Putin comment, as he's just strictly an egotistical, evil man. He's targeting civilians. Those farmers, they didn't do anything. They're running their houses down, running their farmlands, and you try to put a ceasefire in place to let them get out and then cancel the ceasefire. And when you look the direction they were trying to funnel them in the middle, just to surround the wagons and destroy everybody.
So, Representative West, you mentioned you kind of led into our second question for the day, which is that many of you are veterans of foreign conflicts yourselves and have been deployed. So, looking at the situation now, do you believe the United States should engage in a military operation to support Ukraine if the Russian attack continues?
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily with ground troops. But there's a lot of different mechanisms in place, and I would bet that we have probably tier 1 individuals, so spec ops, either SEALs or Delta, or I bet you that they're already over there in advisory capacity as it is right now. And so, but I think, there's other ways to help without putting ground troops in there, especially with the air assets and things like that. I mean, and then helping, we're Afghanistan, Iraq, all these countries that we have been in, part of the job is to train their military and their law enforcement. And so, there's different ways to support them without putting ground troops. I hope it doesn't come down to that, honestly. But I don't know if the tariffs necessarily are going to work.
Other thoughts?
The United States for decades has sold aircraft and munitions to other countries, and we've got jets that we probably mothballed that could be serviced up and put back into commission and allow the purchase the armament from other countries.
Yeah, I think there was a trade that was done. I forget that with the nation, but the U.S. was providing some jets to a nation that was going to then send its jets to Ukraine, which are the jets that their folks are trained on to fly. So I think that was kind of a one goal in that regard. Somebody Representative West said he wasn't too thrilled about the idea of boots on the ground. Who else is anybody in favor? Or does anybody think that at some point, troops need to be deployed from the U.S. over there?
Trace, it's hard to watch on the sidelines from the veterans' perspective, what we were talking about before, but our mission is pretty simple. We have to trust the system and remain ready. Remain ready for whenever the people who need to make that decision make it. Nobody wants our troops on the ground somewhere else, but we have that function, and hopefully the threat of that, brings us a lot of power to these diplomatic discussions. But yeah, I think we have the best military in the world. We just have to maintain our posture of readiness, and wherever that takes us, It sucks for America to be on the sideline and just be rooting for the Ukrainian people like we all are right now. But we have the best military in the world, so we just have to maintain that posture, I think, and wherever it takes us, more troops in more places or not.
Your co-chairman has rejoined us, Representative Stiegel. Question was sort of, do you think that at some point the U.S. will need to engage in a military operation to support Ukraine if the Russian attack continues?
It's a great question, and it's one that everybody seems to be asking right now is, why has no other country really put boots on the ground in Ukraine? And we have to ask that question, really evaluate what's going on. Well, the rest of the world looks at the United States as kind of the police of the world. And a lot of folks here at home hate for us to have to be in that position. But NATO hasn't taken any military actions. The EU hasn't taken any military actions. The request to move air assets or otherwise have been denied by one entity or another. So at some point, the pressure is going to be put on the U.S. to take some sort of action. If we don't, then the rest of the world is going to sit on the sideline as well. And if that's going to be the case, then what we're essentially saying here is that it's okay to bend the knee to this type of tyranny only because of the threat of a nuclear war. And, we're not going to get into the politics of that in this discussion, but we do have to have a very serious discussion now about what our foreign policies are going to be in dealing with guys like Putin. Are we going to let them get away with just simply making a threat, or are we going to call their bluff and get into the action ourselves?
It's an interesting.
Tracy.
Go ahead.
But Tracy, I'm just going to say, history many times repeats itself. We went down this road before World War II. We put severe economic sanctions on Japan. And 2 weeks later, what did Japan do? They bombed Pearl Harbor. So I just think we have to remain vigilant. This is a little different in Iraq and Afghanistan. This was a thriving economy and democracy, and they weren't asking for a fight, and there was no fight from within attacking democracy. And I just, a lot of this is apples and oranges from the past, and all wars are. But I think if we're asleep at the switch, it's going to be we're going to have a rude awakening at some point in time.
We did the same thing in when Israel and Egypt and Nixon called their bluff, and with Brezhnev, and it's just a bully syndrome, and I think we've got to look at what we're going to have to do to call the bluff.
Interesting. Thank you, gentlemen. Brittany, I think you've got the next question and maybe a follow-up or two as well. So
Yeah, so this third one, you guys kind of touched on it a little bit, but what's at stake here in terms of national security in reference to what's going on over in Europe?
Well, like I said, I think it sets a precedence on the outcome of this is going to determine a lot of things down the road with not just with Russia, with China, with North Korea, and a lot of other terrorist states. And so Ty Burns, another member of the Veterans Caucus, he was talking about, Oklahoma's invested in this just by the fact that, Ty was in the 45th, retired from the 45th, and Oklahoma sent 45th members of it to train Ukrainian soldiers. And so they feel there's a connection there with members of our Oklahoma Guard forces to this situation.
if I'm not mistaken, that's Representative Burns' shoulder. We can see. If you want to turn your camera, he can chime in as well. Representative Ty Burns from some county up north. I can't remember exactly where your hometown is.
Yeah, Pawnee County up north, House District 35. And so being a retired member of the 45th Infantry Brigade and having some of my soldiers going over there and training the Ukrainians, and, they have a strong desire to go to Ukraine and try and help fight. I know I talked to several of them and, kind of just slowing them down because they feel really connected to Ukrainians and what we were doing over there to prepare for this. And so again, we're vested here in the state of Oklahoma. So I think we have a really different view with having soldiers over there training them. We're taking it kind of personally for people that are still there today. So.
Yeah. What did that training entail?
Well, and again, once you start talking about the javelins that you heard that they were shooting down some of their aircraft with, and so obviously training them up on that. And one thing about it that they always said is, they may not have been the best trained soldiers, but the resilience and how tough they were, it was unbelievable how tough they were as people and in a group and in a society. So again, as being the disciplined soldiers, they were lacking some of it. And so again, you were trying to get that in proficiency in weapons that they could have, such as the javelin, which we're already seeing the effect day one. You heard stories about that.
All right, so I'm going to pivot a little bit. So what is at stake here economically? What do you say to Oklahomans, when they're at the gas pump and they're seeing those higher prices, and after President Biden, announced the ban on buying Russian oil?
Well, Brittany, to go back to your previous question, what's at stake here, and what kind of national security risks are we looking at? Let's not forget that being energy independent is vital to our nation's national security. Our consumers are going to feel this at the pump, which means they may now be making a decision on, do we put fuel in a tank this week or do we buy groceries? So this obviously has some economic impacts to it as well here at home. Abroad, though, as part of our national defense policies, when we become dependent, even if it's just a fraction, on other foreign oil, such as Russia's oil, which now we're obviously going to stop importing for the time being, then we become dependent on somebody else's oil and gas production. When we have to do that, then oftentimes we're going to find ourselves in a position where we're doing business with other countries that don't necessarily consider themselves friends of the United States. So it's jumping out of the fire and jumping out of the pain and into the fire, so to speak, in some situations, not necessarily putting us in a better position. What we should have done is taken a much stronger look at this a little over a year ago, and how do we maintain the energy independence that we had? It meant a lot to our economy. It meant a lot to our national security, and it was a really great America First type policy that kept the wheels on the economy bus going around and around. Unfortunately, now the consumers are going to feel this at the pump, and hopefully that puts pressure on the administration to understand how important energy independence is to our own country.
It's sickening to see empty shelves here in the United States, and the energy independence. We've got to get back to that. If you look at the history of the United States, anytime we were creating jobs with drilling and production, and everything on the shelf comes. If you look at it, comes from energy related. You got a bottle of water, a plastic bottle, or anything made of plastic, it comes from oil and gas. And so that's the economy we've got to get back to.
Senator Dossett, Senator Peterson, thoughts on the folks who are going to see a little higher price at the pump owing to the import ban?
It was the right move. We had to cut them off. It's going to hurt, but it's absolutely the right move. We need to make Russia hurt every way we can at this point in time.
We were headed this way with the energy policy that we developed with this administration, and this just exacerbated the situation. And we'll come back around, but we're going to pay the price for now. And we can't abandon our support at this point in time. But we're going to feel the pain. But it could have been headed off a lot more than what it was.
Anyone else on that topic? Otherwise, I'll go to our last question for the day. So as the Veterans Caucus, I think Brittany and I are a little curious what the priorities are for the Veterans Caucus this legislative session here in Oklahoma. Are there any bills you guys want to promote of your own legislation or somebody else's that you think could make a difference for either those serving currently in the military or veterans?
Well, I'll start with one because a lot of people don't understand education in the military. And many of us served, as you see, deployed and served on active duty and had access to the GI Bill and out of the post 9/11 GI Bill. So one of the things we want to do is get better access and tuition and fee waivers to our guardsmen. We want our guardsmen to not only be well-trained militarily, but also educated so that post-military, they have the opportunity to go out and get good paying jobs for the sacrifices they've made to serve. And so looking at putting forth more resources in order for our guardsmen to have those tuition and fee waivers. And so I know that's a priority for the Oklahoma Military Department. And, because the more educated your soldier and airman is, the better off our state is.
Awesome. If you come up with a bill number on that, throw it out later. Representative West, go ahead.
So as far as the caucus, the intent of the caucus has always been to, be amongst your peers in both chambers, but to recruit more veterans to serve. And as far as legislation, usually when you hear about things that hit, by the time it hits the meat, it's usually in a negative way, whether it's you're talking about a veterans home or whatever. Usually these topics are toxic in the media. And so that was one reason we formed the caucus too, is to talk about these, whether it's legislation or policy or what have you. We can talk about it as a Veterans Caucus and come to a consensus or not. I mean, we don't, Republicans, Democrats, I don't agree with other Republicans on some issues. It's not all partisan all the time, but the fact that we can sit down in a room and sit across the table and discuss our disagreements without sitting up there calling each other names, that's a positive thing. And so a lot of bills that, especially if it has a fiscal impact, are not ran through the Veterans Committee on the House side, at least. And when veterans bills goes up a lot of time on the board, there's those of us that will be veterans that vote constitutional. And so, but we can discuss, like I said, the purpose of it is to discuss it before it gets to the floor and see if it's actually legitimate, it's going to help veterans, or is it being ran because you can go campaign on it and talk about how, talk about the good things you're doing for veterans. And so we can have all those discussions within the caucus. So it's a positive thing. And this is our 5th year that we've been, the Veterans Caucus has been around, and it's grown every year. I chaired it the first 2 years, myself and Simpson. And then after that, Racino and Stiegel took over. And then JJ brought it, came on the Senate side. So it's a positive thing for the state of Oklahoma, for the veterans of the state. And we always have their best intentions in mind when we discuss things.
That's great.
Representative Stiegel and I are working on a bill for treating veterans for traumatic brain injury with hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and we're doing this bill just to do a study to recognize the use of hyperbarics for traumatic brain injury. It's been used for wound care for decades, and we've already seen proven results with the treatment. And so that's a bill we're going to work on this year and get it through.
We passed several bills off the floor yesterday. The Senate with veterans advantage for veterans. We did some tax exemptions for widows of veterans, and we've made it easier for them to their exemptions for ad valorem taxes. And I've just noticed those are all come across with bipartisan support. And we have tried to do some things for veterans in this session. I know quite a bit.
Wonderful. Well, I think that gets us out of here before the 30-minute mark that we were trying to get under. Any parting thoughts from anybody? Anything anybody wants to say to those who are watching before we close things out?
You know, gas and oil prices are not the only thing that's affected. And of course, that my business at home is farming and ranching. We've seen a spike in grain prices, but at the same time, a decrease in cattle prices because consumers are obviously not going to have the money to spend that we thought they would maybe even 6 months ago. So this is all trickles down to our economy too. So we just hope and pray that we get things resolved over there.
And
You know,
so,
Trace,
go ahead, Chris.
Well, I'm just going to say, you know, we've had an all volunteer Army, Air Force, Marine Corps, Navy for decades. And I will tell you, I still wear the uniform and those, I speak for those on this call. It's a privilege to serve. So one thing I would say to those who are listening and watching this is we appreciate the support that Oklahoma gives to us as veterans and those who continue to serve. I've lived all over this country, and there's no place like Oklahoma that provides that support. And that's why so many veterans are moving here to retire and live.
And to Senator Peterson's point, you know, our economy, as most people know, that you know it's such a commodity-based economy, whether it's oil and gas or agriculture, and so everything that happens up top, you know, especially dealing with what Roland said, with the price of fertilizer, the prices to, you know, as the urban areas expand, rural Oklahoma is expected to produce more food for more people with less land, and so. And on the other side with oil and gas, you know, Saudi and Russia tomorrow could get into another oil battle and start pumping 10 million barrels a day out of the ground and tank our economy here. You know, 2 years ago, gas or oil prices were negative $23 a barrel. And so it's not just what you see on TV at a national level. It all trickles down, like Senator Peterson said. So, and I too, it's an honor to serve. You know, if you're a veteran or you're a spouse of a veteran, need help, you can reach out to any of us, no matter if you're in our districts or not, and we're helping. That's part of our job. And obviously we can relate to you and the certain issues that you may be going through. We've probably gone through them ourselves. And so don't hesitate to reach out to any of us if you need help.
Sounds great. Senator Dossett, as the co-chairman, will you give us your final 30 seconds on this call here?
We just love the support. To piggyback on what Representative West, Representative Kennedy say, you know, in Oklahoma, we're privileged to have the support of our community for our military. It hasn't always been that way, and it's not that way everywhere in the country. So keep making Oklahoma a great place for veterans, for anyone who's watching, because they are the ones who raise their hand and agreed to serve at the cost of themselves and their families.
Thank you so much for everybody who was here. And Brittany Toolis, thank you. It's News 9. Scott Mitchell in the background, thank you so much for making us all look good. I'm Tres Savage with NonDoc.com. Hopefully we can partner on some more discussions like this. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this morning. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.